Hello everyone, my name is William and we are here again back to our second or continuing topic. My initial video was about how to synchronize multiple tenants from one Active Directory forest. You can call this a continuation of that particular video because the second requirement, or let me start from the beginning. So the requirement is possibly a merger or any other reason. One particular Active Directory uh, is synchronized to two different tenants, and that particular Active Directory had two domains. So domain A synchronizes to tenant A, domain B synchronizes to tenant B. Now, how I have done it is, let's suppose this is my domain controller DC. I have domain 1 and domain 2. You can also watch my previous video for better clarification. This is just a synopsis. Now I'm synchronizing the domain 1 with tenant 1 and domain 2 with tenant 2. How I did it? I established two different member server. We can call it M1 and M2, and installed AD Connect on both. But the trick was, the first M1 member server will filter out every other domain or domain 2. It'll only allow domain 1 to synchronize and move it to tenant 1. Similarly, AD Connect 2 on the second member server filters domain 1, hence synchronizes only domain 2 user and then synchronizes it with tenant 2. Now we've already done it. You can also watch my previous video about it. However, in this video we are going to talk about the second part of this project, where I also have to migrate any user from domain 1, all the mailboxes inside an exchange. I need to migrate domain 1 users to tenant 1 and domain 2 users to tenant 2. So both the mailboxes will go to their own respective tenant. Let me try a different color. So D1 is gonna synchronize or migrate all the mailboxes from that belongs to domain 1 to tenant 1, and will migrate all the mailboxes that belongs to domain 2 to tenant 2. Now this is a Exchange 2019, the latest one, so we cannot use staged. We cannot use cutover because we have AD Connect in picture. And third party was something that will cost a little bit extra, so we eliminated that. So now that leaves us with one particular option, which is hybrid migration. Now, if you have watched my previous video or do watch my previous video, you'll come to know that we cannot establish hybrid in this particular scenario because the tenants are split, and we cannot establish a federation trust between this Exchange server with two different Office 365 tenants. So that's not possible. Now, what is possible in this scenario is we can use minimal hybrid mode. Minimal hybrid mode. Now, the plus point of minimal hybrid mode is it does not establish any trust. The sole purpose of having a minimal hybrid as an option is to migrate mailboxes. Now, here's a trick. What we will do is we need to do it by phase. How? First, we will set up a minimal hybrid in a way that the source will always be my forest or my on-premise exchange, but the target will be tenant 1 initially. Then we will start migrating domain 1 users to tenant 1. Once we are done with it, we will move the DNS directly to Office 365 for MX and any other mail record. And then we will remove that hybrid, redo the hybrid again with minimal mode again. And this time we will integrate or connect it with tenant 2 and migrate all the domain 2 to tenant 2. This is my plan. And during this transaction, we are also saving a little bit of money here on the exchange end, because I'm not going to use this exchange for any on-premise mail flow or any other reason. So I'm not going to spend money on activating it. Rather, I'm going to use my hybrid configuration wizard to activate this exchange. And in future, what we will do is we will use AD Connect for constant sync, and we'll manage both the users using this exchange by cutting out this minimal hybrid once we have migrated all the users to their respective tenant. In this way, we are in a win-win situation and using the minimal cost in this scenario. Now, how I'm doing it, I'm gonna show you. So let me shut this down. Now, as you can see, this is my Exchange server. I already have my hybrid configuration wizard installed, and it is ready to run. And as you can see, my on-premise exchange is an unlicensed product. So I'm going to license this right now. How I would do it? You simply have to click on license this server and sign in with your Office 365 tenant. So this is my tenant, which I'm using as a test. Okay, there was no dot in between. And then sign in. In some time, it should license my exchange. As you can see, it's requesting for a product key. So as you can see, I have my exchange enabled. I've also copied my product key for my future reference. In case if I would have to redo the exchange, I can do it. Or you can rerun the hybrid configuration wizard. Either of works. I'm going to click on next. It has picked up both my credentials, which is my on-premise credentials for exchange, and cloud credentials for global admin. We'll click on next, and it's trying to connect to the PowerShells. Next again. Now, as I said, I'm going to use minimal hybrid configuration and not full, because I do not want any trust factor to come in picture, and which later becomes a problem because you have to remove those trusts by using the remove-hybrid configuration. So I'm not going to go with that complex mode. I'm going to simply set it to minimal. I do not want organization transfer because I'm not going to use, or I don't have any at the moment because it's a test lab. But if you have any, you can transfer your policies using it. Next, it's asking me to upgrade. So I'm going to run update. All right, so that part went through. There are some issues, so I had to skip the video, but that part went through. Now the second page is asking me, do you want to synchronize the user password one time? If I'm moving all my mailboxes, I need to do this. Now, since my scenario is a little different, I'm not going to use this. I will install Azure AD Connect later on my own. Now, why did I select this? Because I already have one and it is split into two different tenants. So I don't want all my users to synchronize. So I selected a second. I clicked on next and it says it is configured. Now, since my hybrid configuration is configured and I'm using my tenant 2 at the moment, I'm going to go to my tenant 2. This is my tenant number 2. Let's have a look which domain it is tapped to. It is tapped to tenant test2 domain. So this is my tenant number 2. So I'm going to initiate my migration for domain 2, which is test2.xyz. Now I'm going to go to my migration, add a migration batch. I'll call this test2 users and migration to Exchange Online. Next, migration type remote move. Next, it's asking me to select a migration endpoint. I already created one for remote move, so I'm selecting it. Next, I'm going to manually add the users. So it'll be user 3, which automatically populated because these are the only two users that synchronized on this tenant. User 3 at test2.xyz and user 4 at test2.xyz. Next, target delivery domain will be William Wilpock, or this is my target delivery domain. You see. Next, automatically start and automatically complete. Now you can choose whatever you want. And it's creating a batch. As you can see, this batch is now in a syncing mode. Click on view details, it's validating. So it may take a little bit of time, but once it validates, it's going to start migrating the users. Once this is done, what we need to do is we need to do a cleanup. So since this particular users are getting synchronized to cloud, uh, simultaneously there's a remote mailbox that will also get created on-premise because the mail flow needs to go through. There should not be any downtime. So once this migration is completed, user will be able to log into this mailboxes and start using the mailboxes. The next phase would be cleaning up the existing hybrid and rerunning the hybrid with the second tenant and follow the same exact method. So once this is done, we will move on to the tenant number 1, where we will run the migration batch again to migrate user 1 and user 2, which belongs to test1.xyz domain. And we will say migrate those mailboxes to my tenant number 1.
All right. So the migration is completed and it completed with error because we missed one of the most important part which we need to take care of uh, before we initiate the migration. Now, if you remember, we have one forest, we are syncing it to two different tenants. So, which also means there is a possibility that the source mailbox will have a domain which is not verified in this particular tenant because both the domains are synchronizing in two different individual tenants. So if we click on this migration batch, which completed with errors, click on view details. Now you can see that test user 4 has failed. And if you click on it, it says there is no accepted domain. You cannot use the test1.xyz because it's not an accepted domain in your organization. So this is a crucial part. Now, before we initiate a migration, we need to make sure that the domain that we do not require on this tenant is not a part of alias on the source mailbox. So let's go to our on-premise exchange, or we can directly access it from here, which is https test1 dot sorry mail dot test1 dot xyz slash ecp. Now, test 4 failed, so we'll double click on test 4 on the on-premise exchange mailbox. Go to email address, and you would see that test 4 also has an alias which belongs to test1.xyz. Now, this needs to be removed. So, if you're doing it in bulk, there are PowerShell methods and PowerShell solutions to bulk remove users' alias for a specific domain. But since we are doing it for test users, we are doing it manually by removing that test1.xyz from this mailbox. Luckily, test tree already has that in place. As you can see, test tree does not have any domain associated with test1.xyz, which is a good thing, and that is the only reason it passed the migration. So we are good there, and you also can see that that user got migrated pretty well, and it shows as Office 365 on-premise, which means the migration was completed successfully. At this moment, all the emails that are hitting our on-premise is also been routed to cloud, and the mail flow is still working for the user which are migrated to cloud. So there's no downtime at the moment, but you would actually experience a downtime when you are moving the MX record. Now, for that, what we can do is we can move the MX record first and then later delete the batch. In that case, what will happen? Your mailboxes will go for that one final sync, and uh, you complete it. So the recommendation is when you create a batch, select manual completing of the batch, which is the best way, so that you can move the MX first and then you can complete the batch by removing it or completing it. So I removed the alias from this particular user that belongs to test 1. It only has test 2 and remote routing address. That's all. And a tenant address, which is fine. So now let's go back to our Office 365. We need to resume the migration. So we'll resume the migration again. And this time, hopefully it should pass. So once the migration is completed, we'll again start the next step. So till then, we'll wait and watch. All right. So as you can see, both the users are now synced and migrated properly. It says completed. The only error was an additional alias which belonged to test 1, which we resolved. We removed and resynced and run the migration batch again. And the migration is completed, which means both the users are now onboarded to Office 365 on my test 2 tenant. So we are done with the migration. Now again, there's few more things we have to keep in mind. Now this is only about mailbox migration, but if you would like to migrate SharePoint or OneDrive, I'm going to create a separate video for the same so that you all understand how exactly we can do that. But for now, we are only focusing on mailboxes because this is far more crucial. Uh, OneDrive and SharePoint can be migrated on an API basis, so wouldn't be much of a problem. But yeah, once we migrate the mailboxes, our next step is going to be moving all the DNS record. Now, I'm not going to delete the batch until I move my MX. Now, since I have all my domains on GoDaddy, the replication is quite fast. So it shouldn't take much time for me to route my uh, DNS. So let's go to domain while keeping the batch active right now because Delta Sync is still running. Initial sync is uh, what it does after the migration batch is completed. because you may expect some new email, right? So it's not a problem because already all the mailboxes on on-premise which we migrated are migrated to cloud, which also means there's a remote mailbox on on-premise which is routing the email to cloud. We can keep that setup if your organization wants, but my recommendation is in this scenario, MX should point to cloud to avoid any unnecessary routes. The reason behind this, after this, what we are going to do is we're going to delete this particular hybrid configuration, rerun the hybrid configuration again using the test one tenant so that we can start migrating data there. So I'm going to clean up everything after this DNS move. So we're going to go to the domain. Let's go to DNS record. Now, as I said, we have to add all the DNS record, which is SPF, MX, CNAME, everything. However, what we're going to do right now is we are not going to move all the records right away. Right now, I'm only going to move my MX and SPF DKIMD mark if required because right now all the emails will go from Office 365. So they need to be validated on SPF DMARC DKIM level as well. So those are the record, at least at the moment, we need to. Auto discover we can keep because um, you can actually route your auto discover from on-premise to cloud in a hybrid configuration. But once we remove the hybrid configuration, we also have to r- point this record, which is auto discover record, to cloud directly. So since I have GoDaddy, I have a faster way of doing it on a API level, which Office 365 allows us to do. So if I click on this, it'll take me to the GoDaddy sign-in page where I can sign in, and rest will be done from Office 365 to GoDaddy automatically. I don't have to worry about anything. But again, if you want a manual configuration, you can also do that. What we can do is you can select add your own DNS record because if it's some other provider, of course, you have to follow the second method. Next, and I'll add the MX at the moment for the lab test. So MX here, I'm going to put at the rate, which is domain, and priority is always going to be 0 for MX. Save. Similarly, we need to add all the other records as well. But for this trial, I'm not worried that much. But when it comes to the production, you have to add all the records so that everything routes to cloud directly from there onwards. And once we are done, what we will do is we'll go to on-premise Exchange server. And check. So I can see both the users are now Office 365 users on-premise, which means the migration is completed. Now we'll go to Exchange Online and then go to migration again. Then we can delete this batch. Now, deletion of the batch is always recommended after you update the DNS, and uh, don't delete the batch right away. Delete it after some time. My recommendation is 24 hours, just in case. But since it's a test, we are live deleting it. Delete, confirm. Usually on deletion, it runs one final sync. That is the logic. So in case if there anything is left on-premise, it's gonna run a final cleanup and move it to the cloud. So that is the reason you should hold that batch for at least 24 hours. Uh, wait for the DNS replication to completely take over and then remove the batch. Now, once it says, all right, welcome back. And as you can see that the migration was completed for tenant number 2, which also means that we need to run some cleanup on our on-premise and cloud. related to tenant number 2, but we also have to keep in mind that we have AD Connect, so we will not be removing a lot of information, but we need to remove specific informations related to hybrid configuration wizard. And now, since we are going to run or rerun the hybrid configuration wizard, referencing our second tenant. My second tenant is already empty because we haven't done anything there. The first tenant has all the information. So we need not to do anything on the second tenant uh, Exchange Online side. In on-premise also, we can run the command called remove hyphen hybrid configuration to clean up the hybrid section, but we will keep all those attributes which may relate to AD sync because we don't want to break the AD sync. So the only thing that we need to remove possibly is technically there's nothing at the moment that we need to remove, but we will see going forward if there's anything that hinders to our rerunning of hybrid configuration wizard. So let's go to our Exchange server, and here what we will do is we will uninstall the hybrid configuration wizard first because we need to rerun it. Let's uninstall it at the moment. So as you can see, we have this application here. We're gonna uninstall it because we will reinstall it from the beginning so that it asks me for the credentials again. I'll say remove application from this computer and it's gone. Now let's install this hybrid configuration wizard again, and the installation URL is aka.ms/hybrid wizard. Now we need to open this and install it. All right, we'll click on next. It's automatically picking up my Exchange server, which will of course be the same. And it is licensed, so we need not to worry about it. And on a Exchange Online, I need to sign in using the second tenant. So click on sign in here. And meanwhile, I would also like you all to try it without uninstalling it. Uh, my experience was whenever you try to rerun the hybrid configuration, which is already installed, it picks up the credential. But I feel that it might not in this scenario based on this behavior. However, you can try anything since it's a out of the box scenario. You need to calculate and move ahead. So I'm going to sign in using the second credential, the second tenant's credential. Let's click on next. Next again. I'm going to use a minimal hybrid. As I said, we'll not use a full hybrid because we don't want any trust factor in this. The whole purpose is to migrate only. And this is out of the box scenario. So my recommendation is not to use the full hybrid configuration wizard. Just use a minimal so that we can target the objective, which is migration only. Click on next. We'll use a classic because modern has agents. We don't want to go into that. Let's keep it simple. Next again. Now it's asking me to enter the credential to create a migration endpoint. So this is the important task. So we'll do that. And just to let you know, it's asking me for my on-premise credential. Next and update. It shouldn't take much of a time because it's only going to do some very basic hybrid setups, not a full hybrid. So shouldn't take more than a minute or two, I guess. Now this is where it's trying to create the migration endpoint. As you can see, test hyphen migration server availability, a new hyphen migration endpoint. So technically it's running all the PowerShell commands on the backend when we talk about hybrid configuration wizard. Right. So as you can see, the hybrid configuration wizard is completed. And I'm going to choose, I will install Azure AD Active Directory Connect later because I've already installed it. I don't want to reinitiate this part. I do not want to reinitiate this part uh, again. So I'll say I will install Azure Active Directory later. Now, since I've already installed a hybrid configuration wizard, we've already installed a hybrid configuration wizard and the endpoint is created. I can initiate a migration for the new tenant right now. So this is my new tenant, or rather the other tenant where I intend to migrate the test one users. You can see the domain is already verified. Create a migration batch. Let's call it test one user. Migrate to Exchange Online. Next, migration type will be remote. Next, next again. And as you can see that the hybrid configuration wizard has already created a migration batch. So we'll select existing migration batch. Let's click on next. Manually add the users. So we'll add user 1 and user 2. Next, the target delivery domain will be, of course, the new tenant or the test 1 tenant. Next, I'll automatically start and automatically complete, but I'll leave it to your decision based on your requirement. And let's create a batch. The batch is created, which means that it is starting to synchronize mailboxes. Once it is done, we'll do the final DNS and that would be the end of the video. But we'll wait for this completion to be done. Right. So it seems that the migration batch is completed since it's an empty mailbox technically. Let's click on the migration batch, click on view details, and I can see that the migration is completed with perfect consistency score. Now, this means that my migration was successfully done. And just to reiterate and recap the entire scenario, which also includes the scenario from the previous video where I've done a ED sync. I'm going to start from the beginning. So let me show you the plan and the topology how we initiated it. There's a slight change in the topology design. However, it makes the same impact. So as you can see, I have one particular forest in Active Directory where I created filters and I have filtered all the two domains in two different member servers where I have two different AD Connect installed. And this AD Connect synchronizes to tenant number 2 and this AD Connect synchronizes to tenant number 1. That's how I'm synchronizing one forest to multiple tenants. And regarding migration, what I did is I actually ran a hybrid on tenant number 2 first, and I ran a migration batch. But the hybrid that I ran was a minimum hybrid and not a full hybrid because the objective was only to migrate the mailboxes and use Office 365 as prime, not as hybrid in both the conditions. So what I did is I ran a hybrid configuration with minimum hybrid, ran the migration for user that belongs to domain number 2, tenant number 2. Once I'm done with that, I remove that particular configuration, reran the hybrid configuration result again with minimum hybrid on tenant number 1 and ran the migration. Now, the things to keep in mind during the migration is when you initiate a migration, you should only initiate a migration on one tenant at a time. Second thing is keeping the migration batch intact. You should move your DNS and then wait for at least 24 hours, depending upon how long your DNS replicates, and then delete the migration batch later in both the scenarios. And that's how you can actually uh, achieve this requirement where one particular forest had to be uh, one particular forest with multiple mailboxes had to be migrated to two different tenants, keeping the synchronization intact for some business reasons. Also, I would like to also show you one more thing, which is the route of this present scenario. Now, as you can see, I have the same scenario where one single forest is synchronizing in three different tenants. Mailboxes are already migrated to Exchange Online, and you can see that three different domains are actually moving the emails directly to their respective tenant externally. So if anybody sends an email to the users, it will go to the public DNS and to Office 365 direct. For auto discover, when you're sitting outside the network, you already have a CNAME which will directly route you to your exchange and thus getting your Outlook configured. If you're sitting inside the network on a domain join machine, what I've done is I have created three different zones for three different domains or two different domains. And I've created a redirect request of CNAME, which is autodiscover to that respective domain.com pointing to autodiscover.outlook.com, which technically does a reiterative query and reaches the exchange option. Mailflow will work as usual, and this is how your entire configuration will work. This topology was designed by me just for this particular requirement, and I hope it made sense. And thank you so much for watching.